Now listen, I get it, there seems to be an ETF out there these days that at least seems to offer anything and everything any investor could possibly imagine. And although there's all these different flashy ETFs out there with all these different unique strategies that at least seem to be able to offer the entire world to investors, there's actually just a handful of super high quality ETFs that over the last several years and even decades have offered investors consistent returns, massive performance, outperforming almost all different stocks and ETFs across the market. So in this video, we're going to put to the side all the fancy, complicated, brand new ETFs just for a second, and we're going to go over some of the most basic, highest quality, best performing sleep well at night ETFs, and I'm going to share with you guys what these ETFs have to offer. Especially during times when the market has been so volatile, you might want to look into some of these to sort of stabilize your personal portfolio. So if you want to see which 7 ETFs I think might be some of the highest quality, best performing across the entire market, and I'm not talking for a single year, I'm talking for sometimes decades. Well, then make sure to stick around, drop a like down below, and let's get right into the first ETF. My A to Z dividend investing ebook has helped countless dividend investors get started with their journey. And my custom dividend tracker that I'm constantly using here on the channel has also helped so many investors stay on track and allow them to see their dividend income in real time. Well, today I have another treat for you guys. I'm not only going to offer you my A to Z dividend investing ebook and the custom dividend tracker, but also just for a short limited time, I'm going to be adding in my brand new weekly dividend blueprint ebook to show you how you can get started with weekly dividend ETFs and add this into your investing strategy. This offer is not going to last long, so go ahead and click the first link down below in my description, and you're going to get both ebooks and the custom dividend tracker bundle. But like I said, please act fast because this won't be around for long. Now let's get back into the video. Now the first ETF has not only offered sometimes 24, 25, 26%, 28% return in a single year, but also is extremely diversified and super low cost to hold on to. The number one of 7 ETFs that I definitely think would be worth looking into is one of my favorites, the VOO ETF from Vanguard, the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. This ETF's expense ratio is just 0.03%, so it's almost free to hold on to. This ETF invests in 500 of the largest US companies, the S&P 500. So again, if you're talking high diversification, if you're talking sleep well at night ETFs, VOO might be one of the number one ETFs in that entire category. Now, like I mentioned, VOO over time has performed very well. Sometimes the total return has been as high as 28+%. There also have been years where VOO didn't perform as well as others, but if you look at the max time frame since 2010, VOO has returned around 623%. Now, VOO only offers a 1.19% dividend yield, even though a lot of the ETFs we talk about on my channel are much more dividend focused. But again, in the context of taking things back to the basics or de-risking your portfolio and building out a super high quality foundation, I mean, you're getting access to around 500 different companies in this one ETF, which means even if 10, 20, 30 have a bad year, the rest of the ETF should pick up the slack. All to say that without a doubt, VOO is a great foundational ETF and definitely makes it in number 1 on this list. Number 2, another super high quality one of my favorites is VYM, the Vanguard High Dividend Yield ETF, which has an expense ratio of 0.06% and a dividend yield of around 2.6%. Now, VYM seeks to track the performance of the FTSE High Dividend Yield Index, which measures the investment return of common stocks of companies characterized by high dividend yields. Now, as far as sleep well and night diversification, VYM is also definitely in that category with over 500 different stocks in this ETF as well. Now, as far as performance goes, VYM since 2006 has returned around 364%. And just like any other high quality ETF, some years higher than lower, 17.5% last year, around 7% the year before that, 26% back in 2021. All to say that if you want to de-risk your portfolio, sleep well at night, and still want to have exposure to massive returns that honestly are probably going to outperform a lot of other single stocks and ETFs in the market, VYM is definitely an ETF to look into. Now, another one of my favorites is VIG, the Vanguard Dividend Appreciation ETF. This ETF has an expense ratio of 0.05%, has a yield of around 1.65%, and seeks to track the performance of the S&P US Dividend Growers Index. Now, this ETF is great because it holds on to around 330 plus stocks that all have a history of paying dividends, growing their dividends over time, but also there's a lot of growth potential. Now, annually, sometimes 17%, 15%, sometimes as high as almost 30%, and then of course there are those few years that are down. Now, cumulatively, VIG has offered almost 500% total return since 2006. So like I said, this ETF is going to be, just like the others, very hard to outperform. Now, I like this ETF specifically because it does offer some high dividend growth, which means over time you're going to get paid dividends, but more and more in dividends, at least if history were to repeat itself. Again, for 0.05% expense ratio, you're getting exposure to a massive amount of high quality stocks that honestly are probably going to allow you to sleep pretty good at night. Now next I have to have SCHD in this list because not only is this my largest ETF holding across my personal portfolio, but also SCHD, just like the others, is well diversified, cheap to hold on to, offers dividends and offers dividend growth, and basically everything else you need to sleep well at night. Now SCHD offers around a 3.5% dividend yield starting off, so this is going to be one of the higher dividend payers out of this bunch. It has a portfolio of around 100 different holdings, so not as diversified as the first few, but as far as performance goes, SCHD is definitely not lacking, around 12-13% per year every single year on average since inception. Now, I personally like SCHD the best out of all these ETFs because it does offer the most dividend yield, and for someone like myself that does want to live off of dividends in the next, say, 2, 4, 6, 8 years, that's going to be more important to me than maybe the next investor. All that to say that in my entire portfolio, this is one ETF that I never really have to worry about, which is amazing. A few more ETFs to go through, another super high quality, sleep well at night, well diversified, and has a lot to offer is DGRO, the iShares Core Dividend Growth ETF. The expense ratio on this one is 0.08%, so again, super cheap to hold on to. The dividend yield on this one is somewhere in the 2% range if I'm not mistaken, and cumulatively this ETF, just like the others, has returned investors hundreds of % return in the green. Now as far as the holdings go for DGRO, this ETF has a nice mix of dividend payers, dividend growers, and of course a little bit more growth names like Apple and Microsoft. And honestly, any one of these different ETFs could be used as a single position for a foundational position in a long-term portfolio, or you could of course hold on to a little bit of all of them, because just to be honest, there's a lot of holdings that overlap in all these. All to say that DGRO over time has also performed very well, is fairly low beta, has paid you dividends and more in dividends over the years. Now the second to last ETF that I think is a perfect foundational ETF, especially for a boring, stable, low stress portfolio, is DGRW, the Wisdom Tree US Quality Dividend Growth Fund. Now this ETF is great because although it does offer dividends and dividend growth, it invests in a lot of growth oriented names, things like Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, names that are going to help your portfolio grow over time, especially during bull markets. Now DGRW is a little bit less talked about. It does have a little bit more expensive expense ratio at 0.28%, but this ETF, just like the others, is definitely worth looking into. I've held on to this one for around a year or two now, and absolutely loving it in my portfolio. Now last but not least, speaking of ETFs that aren't necessarily talked about as much, FDVV, or the Fidelity High Dividend ETF. Now this ETF has offered double-digit returns several years. It offers a 2.8% dividend yield, which means you're going to get a decent amount of cash flow right from day one. And just like the others, is very well diversified, with some of the top names being things like Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, Broadcom, etc., etc. Now, I've made videos in the past about FDVV, and I definitely think it's worth looking into. Again, not necessarily as popular as some of the other ones we talked about, but this is another very sleep well at night, simple ETF that offers exposure to tons of different high quality names, but also from day one offers exposure to dividends and of course a massive amount of growth potential. So there we have it. Those are 7 different ETFs that come to mind when I think about sleep well at night, simple yet effective, high quality ETFs to invest into and maybe even build out a foundational position. Now in my long-term portfolio, I have almost 2,400 shares of SCHD that I would consider a strong pillar keeping up the rest of the house. So especially during times of volatility, my entire portfolio has held up pretty nicely, at least relatively speaking. But now before I go, I have one question for you guys down below. As far as a foundational position when it comes to ETFs, what's your #1 favorite across the entire market? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like on it and subscribe for more future content like this. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.